like to take you through a Bible text this morning. And my son and my wife, they were asking us what you're going to talk about, what object you're going to carry, as usual. And then I said, I have nothing but a Bible text to ponder upon with the Sabbath school members for just few minutes. And this text is taken from Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. It says, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." We have been going through this text. We have heard many times about it, and it might be just a refreshing once again this morning, the thought as to this text wants to tell us and display. Jesus Christ and his disciples and the multitude had gathered on that mount, as we read in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus preached one of the best sermon ever a preacher can preach in the world, and that is Sermon on the Mount, or the Beatitudes. Over there, Jesus sought to give the true conception of the kingdom that is going to come. But on the other hand, people expected some unusual announcement of Jesus establishing his kingdom right here on this earth by overthrowing the Roman Empire and the Roman yoke. A feeling of expectancy, of change was very much high in the air. And that's the time we see the disciples, they left their livelihood and followed Jesus Christ in anticipation that he will establish kingdom and they will have a place in that kingdom. It was time when ordinary people of Palestine and the people of region of Galilee saw the wondrous power of Jesus, the miraculous power of Jesus, and saw the miracles and wondered if one day he will establish his kingdom right here on this earth. Against all such expectations of this people, Jesus said, "For I tell you that your righteousness need to exceed or surpass that of Pharisees and the teachers of the law of that time." And this was one of the shocking announcements that they could ever hear from a man called Jesus Christ, to whom they looked up as the next emperor or the king we will deliver from the Roman yoke or the tiny rule that was there. Because on the other hand, they knew the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, were very religious people. They were the most eager people to do righteous deeds in the church. They were the defenders of faith. They knew they were so eager to be righteous that they had built thousands of rules around God's law as in protection and to follow it. They were one of the devoted groups of that time. The religious people, they fasted twice a week. They strictly observed Sabbath day, as ever anyone could observe in this day. And they paid tithe of all that they possessed. They were so strict about all these rules and regulations. They liberally gave offerings and dutifully performed all the religious ceremonies that was there in the synagogue or in the church. And on here Jesus says, your righteousness need to exceed, surpass that of Pharisees and religious teachers. What was wrong there? Why did Jesus make such a statement of their righteousness? Was all their right doing wrong? Were their right acts bad? What about own righteousness? When we compare with Sadducees and Pharisees of that time, can we surpass them? What about own good deeds? Dear church, Sabbath school church members, what about the services and the actions and the service that we do in the church and outside, can our righteous exceed? This is something to think about. If not, then why did Christ told his listener that they should be more righteous than the Pharisees and the teachers of law? The central problem, to cut it short, the central problem of the Pharisees is mentioned by Paul in the book of Romans chapter 10 verse 3. And this is what Paul says about their righteousness. And he said, "For I can testify about them. They are zealous for God, but their zeal is not based on the knowledge, since they did not know the righteousness that comes from God and sought to establish their own. They did not submit to God's righteousness." This is the testimony of Paul about the righteousness of Pharisees and the teachers of law of that time. This was their central problem. This was a very serious spiritual problem about which they are unknown. How about us? How about us? We are doing service to the Lord in the church as well as outside. What about us? That means by this text I find their own righteousness was the big problem in their spiritual life. Their own righteousness had become a closed door on their faces. Their kind of morality, these people, Pharisees, they had kind of morality that they fitted in their own ideas and concepts of goodness and spiritual life. And all this they tried to fit on others. This is what was happening exactly at that time, and that's why Paul has to mention that Pharisees concentrated on their own righteousness, on self-righteousness. They became proud of righteousness that they were possessing. They constantly put their right doing on the display, showcase. They wanted people to gaze at them and look at them and the way they are living godly life. This was the righteousness that they wanted to say or tell to the people. What about us as the members of Seventh-day Adventist Church? What about our good deeds? What about our service? What about our actions? What about us as a church and its mission? What is the definition of my religious living, righteous life, or the spiritual life I'm trying to live? What are our actions? What are our services? It all can become impure. From this text I understand all my service, actions, good actions can be impure if my motives are impure. If my motives are wrong, all my service is in vain. Our righteous acts can become unrighteous if at all my motives are wrong in doing it. Lastly, I have a wonderful quotation from a great theologian of Methodist Church in America. His name is C.G. Chappell, and in the book of Sermon on the Mount, this is what he says to the church and to the members. The moral quality of a deed is determined by the motive that it gives it birth. The moral quality in the church that we display of a deed that we say it or enact it is determined by the motive that it gives it birth. That therefore not only the evil but the very good we do may have no merit at all. The best of deeds may be poisoned and vitiated by bad motives. My friends, whether our good works are righteous, whether our good works are pure, it all depends on the fountain from where it flows. If the fountain is pure, surely the streams will be pure. If the fountain of the motivation is wrong, evil, the actions will be evil. If the fountain is impure, the streams will be impure. And this is the lesson that Jesus wanted to teach the multitude and the disciples that had gathered on the mount, where he preached one of the best sermons. And the entire chapter, if you see, it is talking about the righteousness and the way we need to live at the end of the chapter. And then he compares and he says, it is not the same with the Pharisees and the teachers of law. May your righteousness exceed. May your righteousness surpass that of Pharisees and the followers of law at that time, so that we will make it to heaven. May God bless us as we serve this church. May God bless us as we serve the entire world in a way of our evangelism and the faith that we display. God bless us.